All right, we're live. We're back. Hello, everybody. My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show. Today I'm with Jeffrey Fry. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going today?
Good, Sonny. How are you, buddy?
I am doing well. I'm
Good.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm quite excited about our interview today. I've
Oh,
been
thank you.
reading about your background and all the cool stuff. You know what? Normally I dive into the deep end with what you're doing now, but let's start with the profit. The profit. What's the
Yeah.
story behind that one?
So it's funny, when I was a kid, I knew that, I came from an okay family. I was not poor by anything, but my parents separated when I was young, and I was still sent away to a boarding Catholic military school. That's another story totally. But I knew if I wanted anything, I had to do it myself. So I wanted to buy a car when I was 16. So at 12, a buddy and I started a car washing business during the summer. And by 16, I was able to buy my first car in cash. And that's what started me in business. So from there, I said, oh, some people want to be astronauts and stuff like that. And I said, I always knew I wanted to be an engineer. I just didn't know what type. So when I went to college, I worked my butt off to get really good grades. I went to Lafayette College, good school, became an electrical engineer. And my first job was with Texas Instruments and down in Midland, Texas. And so I go there and they wanted me in sales and marketing. And the reason why is because they said, wow, you're the first electrical engineer that we've spoken to that could put three sentences together coherently. And I said, you're in marketing. I said, I don't know what marketing is. They put me in those glorified clerkdom, essentially. I hated it. But weirdly, because I went to Midland, nobody wanted to live in Midland, Texas. And so an opportunity came up because you had to have an electrical engineer be operations director. And I was just a punk kid, right? So they said, hey, it's hard for us to recruit engineers out here. Would you like this job? Well, at that moment, I'd done my 2 year stint and I said, okay, I'm going to leverage this. And I did. Got more money, got a pay raise, got a job grade increase. But I also stepped into a hornet's nest because this division had never made an organizational profit in its history. And there was a lot of angry customers. So the first thing I had to do, this is engineering training, is that I got to do a Pareto analysis. What is causing me most of the problems? I get calls every day of angry customers. And do you know what it was? Paperwork. In other words, we had to do testing and send, because it was military, and send it out. And this was the easiest solution of my life. Send paperwork to everybody, just not the people that requested. It was literally 10, it was like a point 10 cents of a cent to send paperwork out, and it saved oodles about of money. So what ended up happening at TI, we ended up becoming the most profitable division in TI's history. So we made three times as much product with half as many people. And in that process, I was all about, I don't care how much we're selling, because we were actually selling sole source products at a loss. Don't even go there. Wow, I'm bringing back trauma. At the end, we weren't. But at that moment, they gave me that because I was hyper focused on margin dollars, margins, profit. I didn't care how big our sales were. I cared how much profit we made. And so everyone called me the profit prophet. And at the end, when I left TI, that was the one thing about it. I got another opportunity to go up to Maine, but that's where it started. It was all about doing more with less.
Super cool. So I guess before we even begin, I wanted to ask you. So, do you mind sharing maybe like a paragraph or two? Like, we'll keep it short for now, but we will come back to it. You want to just share a little bit about Keep Safe Care, what your mission is, and what you guys are
Yeah,
building?
it's even better than that. It's a sentence. We take care of caregivers so they take better care of you. It's in-home care, helping with activities of daily living, but it's mostly about supplying caregivers for people that need care. And again, being an engineer helped a lot. The biggest problem in private duty, they call it private duty or personal care services, caregiver turnover. Caregiver turnover is 83%. I like big numbers. Caregiver turnover, when you take care of caregivers, drops to under 5%. And what that does, that solves a whole host of problems that are in this industry. But mostly it's about focusing on caregivers.
Yeah, I love that. It's a beautiful mission. So, I guess take me back to, I don't know, Midland, Texas, right? Your first job out of Lafayette. You were
Yep.
talking about Texas Instruments, right? So
Yep.
what pulled you in as an electrical engineer to Midland of all places?
Well, it's funny because, and there's another story. It's always about, There's a guy named Les Brown, and he's a motivational speaker, really, and he always talks about the why. Why do you do things? Well, I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico. I speak no Spanish. Thank you, Mom. And I used to, there was a cartoon called Pacasito about a horse and something. I don't even remember it. My grandfather does. But anyway, the first word I ever said, it was sponsored by Texaco. The first word I ever said was Texaco. So I had a funny feeling I was coming to Texas. That was one thing. So, but it was about the opportunity. So, I did my rounds and graduated, went out to California with HP, Texas Instruments, a bunch of people on the East Coast, which I did not want to stay on. The East Coast was not, it wasn't about the weather, it was about the people. They were kind of defeatist. And so California and Texas, I kind of narrowed it down to that. And when I came to Midland, Midland's the high desert. It was like kind of rural at the time, but the people were just friendly. It was just like, I think I'll be comfortable here in Texas. And the in Palo Alto where HP was, really bright people and everything, but it's kind of like, I grew up with a lot of snooty people in DC. I don't want to, let me detox a little bit. So made the right move for the wrong reasons to move to Midland.
So you spent over 20 years inside Texas Instruments, Fairchild, Harris, Philips, AMD, Synopsys. Like these are the giants, right? So
Mm-hmm.
what did that, decades long run inside semiconductors teach you that, you still use every day today?
Well, one thing I found out, this is what I learned in sales. So I moved from technology, even though, I got to show you something like this. I keep this phone still. And the reason why I keep this phone, when I was a kid,
Wow.
the
Okay.
reason why I helped design the first digital cellular phone circuits that Nokia used, and I
Oh,
convinced Nokia to use it. So it was kind of easy to get them to come to Florida. We're in Melbourne, Florida, and it was February. And they call, and they're I wrote an article about how the digital mobile will essentially be free. Well, I was close, and that amps phones were going away, and somebody else told me invent the future that's already happened. Cheaper, faster, better. Cheaper, faster, do more with less, right? So digital, you learn that in Moore's law. What things get twice as fast, half as big, twice as fast. The scaling down on cost and performance doubles as prices get cut in half. Same was going to happen in wireless. So it was just evident. I wasn't inventing anything. I was just sliding over. But in the semiconductor world, everything changes fast. If you sit on your hands, it's just going to pass you by. So the one thing I also learned in it, I moved into sales and marketing more, which is really product placement. So I learned to sell to my customer's customer. And people said, well, what does that mean? I said, well, let me give you an example when I was at AMD. So AMD was competing with Intel, and I had a big discussion with the founder about you're never going to beat Intel. He said, "What? Intel has you don't know this, but they have 4 designs ahead of you. You just don't know it. They hide it. As soon as you put out the K5, they have something that's twice as good." So I said, "But who you can beat is Motorola." And they said, "Why?" He says, "Because your core is a really good DSP processor." Didn't want to go there. Wanted to go to laptops. I said, "You're going after a market that's dead." And I said, "How do you do that? What are you saying the PC market's dead? It's networking. It's all about connectivity, not about PC processing. The processing is going to be, I didn't call it cloud. I was going to say it's going to be remote. It's not going to be big iron. It's going to be a network system." And they looked at me like I was speaking, Greek. I said, "Fine." So long story short, I left AMD after like 9 months because they hired me to be a quote futurist and they wouldn't listen to me. But the one thing I did, I had a buddy that was the vice president of marketing, and I came back to him. I said, "Okay, you guys paid me a lot of money to come out to Austin. I owe you something, and here's the O." Intel had the Intel Inside Boy I made you myself, and I said, "Okay, here's where you could beat Intel." So you have a really good communications piece of hardware and software. And I said, you start a commercial like this. Somebody's working on a computer, you see the Intel inside, and you start to fade out. And now you see all these little emeralds all around connecting everything. And you say, Intel's inside, AMD's everywhere. They didn't do it. I'm like, it's like you don't have to do anything different. That's what you are. And I said, nah, I don't think they'll buy that. I said, really? Being ubiquitous is not what you really want to be. So I gave it to him. He didn't use it. And that's what I learned. It's about selling to your customer's customer. So at AMD, the customer was not the person making the device; it was the person using the device. So make it more efficient, cheaper, and faster. So that's how I always think about
When did you first realize that you were better at branding, marketing, and selling than at, engineering itself? Like, was there a specific moment that flipped?
it. Actually, kind of yes. When I was a young baby, a niño, and I called my grandfather Belingo. And one day I'm like 13, 14 years old, and I'm in Puerto Rico, and my grandfather played Major League Baseball and whatnot. And everyone called him Blingo. And I said, hey, Blingo, what does Blingo mean? And he turned to me and says, I have no idea. He goes, what do you mean you have no idea? That's what you called me when you were a baby. And so I tried to say, I called you Belingo? Why? And so I'm thinking back, I said, oh, I'm dyslexic. Oh, I couldn't say abuelo. I said a Belingo. And that's the only thing I could come up. So I named my grandfather. That was the first thing I named. And everybody called him that because I would go, Belingo Seda. There's no Belingo Seda. His name was Pepe. And so I said, Mom, why didn't anybody tell me? They don't know my name either. Remember the cartoon about Pacasito? Everyone in Puerto Rico on my mother's side calls me Packy. They don't know my name, Jeffrey, who was named after my grandfather, Jefe. And I'm like, so everyone knows me as Packy or Pack. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go by Packy. That's fine. And now that I know the story behind it, it's actually makes a lot more sense. It's kind of cute. So I just was always good at. Here's another thing. My father uh, raised horses. Our family crest in England. We used to raise horses for the King's Army, the Fries. It just happened to be in our blood. He had thoroughbreds at the time, whatever he was doing. One thing I was really good at was naming his horses. So usually when you do a name, you put the sire's name and the mare's name together. And so we had one was out all night, and the other one was something with a bar, and I named her Foolish Pleasure. And the other one was Hitch a Ride, and the other one was Sweet Honey, Sweet Hitchhiker. I mean, to me, it was just it was like that's the easiest friggin' word. I mean, it was like, where do you go? I mean, isn't it obvious? Like, so yeah, I've always been good at branding for some reason.
So,
That's how my brain works.
so you came back to Austin in 2000, right, and launched your first
Yep.
startup. So what made you walk away from a senior management track at a public company to essentially bet on yourself?
Oh, I am not. I don't play well with idiots. I can't work for somebody that I just don't have. That they're like, play within the box. I said, nah, I can't do that. I'm not. Even though I went to military school for 7 years, I'm like, I know I only have a limited amount of time here. Do I really want to keep working for people that just want they're corporate and they gotta play within the lines. They can't do anything novel, and that's part of the reason why I left Philips. Great company, super people, treated you really well. They were paranoid about trying anything new. Matter of fact, the whole reason why Broadcom is because they have all the chips that I told Philips to make, and they didn't want to do it. And the guy that worked for me went to Broadcom, and Broadcom made all the chips. There you go. That's why I'm not in corporate America anymore. I said, got to do it myself, and that's fine.
So you're something like 10 startups in. Most founders never make it past one, right? So what's the pattern in the ones that worked versus the ones that didn't?
Leadership and timeliness to market. We've had great ideas, poor leaders. And that was one thing I learned. A good idea with a poor leader will die. A mediocre idea with a great leader has a chance of success. And everyone talks about time to market, and it really isn't that. It's timeliness to market. So I always liken it to like someone throwing a baseball. You got to be hitting it, to hit a home run. You got to hit it at the right time, right? It's timeliness, not time to market. So a lot of times you could be a little late, but what you're bringing is so innovative that everybody uses it. Look at I mean, when Google came out, there were 165 web browsers out there. Google was late to the market, but what they did, their timeliness was right because everybody copied everybody else, all those ads and everything. Google was clean. They were all about ranking, page rank, and whatnot. The history's done. Boom, timeliness to market. They came when there was a need and it was growing. Amazon's the same thing. Amazon, everybody poo-hooed Amazon. They're losing money for 10 years. But Bezos, he said, I know what I want to be. I want to be the back engine of all e-commerce in the world. I remember he started with music because I bought music off of Amazon and books. That's what Amazon was, books and music. They're not that now. So yeah, kudos to them. And you just look at people that kind of envision the future and they just stick at it. It's that simple.
Mm.
So that's the difference between success. You get a visionary. It's not about them. It's about the mission. And when the mission's accomplished, then it's about them. But until then, it's about the mission. Those are the things that were successful.
So before any of the caregiving work, excuse me, what was your relationship with your mother like? What kind of woman was Glenda?
Oh, wow, that's a good question because I was estranged from my family for 20 years. And part of the reason why it's when all my parents and my brother were alcoholics and I didn't drink. So I was a recovering alcoholic because I never drank. So, and that's what they said. Oh, you don't drink? I said, no, because I see what it's done to them. And I'm terrified of becoming an alcoholic because it's in my genes, right? So somehow I'm going to be an alcoholic. So when my oldest son was born, I told my family, if you want a relationship with your grandkid and your nephew, you need help. You go and get help for your alcoholism. And they didn't. So left, right? That's it. Fine. You're gone. We're done. I can't have a relationship with people that are dysfunctional. I don't want that with my kid. So long story short, and I was very close with my mom. And that was the disappointing thing. My mom sided with my father, and had been divorced for 18 years, 20 years. And I'm like, okay, great, fine, bye. I'm going to Texas. And so when my brother died, he first had a heart attack. I called him. I spoke to him. Everything was fine. I said, so it takes a heart attack for me to call you. Great. Come on down with mom. Blah blah. Meet your two nephews. Bring mom. 4.5 hours later, after that call, he was dead. So the first time I see my mom in 20 some years, I got to bury my brother. And at that time, I had two choices, and we all have two choices. There's no gray. It's good or evil, right? I could have helped my mom out, forgiven the past, move on. She's my mom. Or I could have just held a grudge and said, you're on your own. I chose the first, and it was the right move. And I said, past is the past. I can't change that. You need help. You're starting to get a little bit of dementia. I got to take care of you. I mean, you did the best you could with me. Fine. And weirdly, she had stopped drinking on her own. So she cleaned herself up. Great. Um, hired a private duty agency up in DC, and that started everything. That started the whole pivot into where I am now.
So 2007, as you mentioned, your brother passes, right? So you
Yep.
become your mother's primary caregiver. Walk me through that first year. What did you see inside the system that nobody talks about?
Well, I put my brother to rest. May he rest in peace. And my mom was totally accomplished woman. She worked for the State Department for 49 years, as high as you can go. You know, um, so what happened is that her eyesight was getting a little. Wasn't able to process sight well. Her eyesight was fine. It was her brain that was failing. She was getting forgetful. And she wasn't that way. She wasn't as clean. So I said, you need somebody to come in, help you with a shower, make your bed, do your laundry. 2 times a day. Twice. Make sure you get something to eat. Make sure everything's clean. And so what happened, my frustration is that, and there were the agency that I hired, they only had Nigerians. They don't cook meat. They didn't know how to make. My mom loves steak and chicken, so I had to order from the Safeway down the road. She lives in Alexandria, it's close. I said, feed her this, please, because that's what she loves. But what happened is they didn't really understand about bathing, and my mom, every now and then would start speaking Spanish because the dementia was coming back in. They don't know Spanish, so essentially they just kind of just sat there. There was no oversight. They didn't check on my mom. and this is what happened. My mom got a cut. It got infected, probably because it got urine in it. She got sepsis and almost died. She was in the hospital 6 days. I said, "That's it. You're moving down here to me with Austin." To Austin. Now I had the durable power of attorney, had durable medical authority, and I had what was the other thing? I can't remember. And the will was done. So I said, "No, moving down here with me." Sold her place, had her move in with me. The smartest thing I did, not because I thought I was going to start a business, but because I got to know my mother, and that was, you get to a certain point in your life that things in the past, some people hold grudges, and I'm like, nah, she's my mom. You know, they say payback's a bitch, but it really wasn't. It was the best thing I ever did. I got to know Gladys, and it explained a lot of things about the relationship with my father, who was not particularly a gentleman, and about her resilience and how she never gave up. And I said, oh, now I know where I get it from. You. So best thing that ever happened. I got to know my mom as a woman, not as my mother, and she was pretty epic. So part of the reason why I'm here is because I made a promise to her about when I discovered, the situation.
And you promised that you'd fix it, right? So how serious was that promise in the moment, and when did you turn it into a business plan?
Well, I had done like 8 startups when my mom had moved down. I was in the middle of one at the time, and so and that's why I needed a caregiver, right? Because I was working out of the house, and in the morning I need a little bit of time, and late afternoon I need a little bit of time, so I can do like conference calls and whatnot. So she the caregiver what we got finally hired a small private duty agent. I knew nothing about private duty, zero. Hired a small one. The woman that we got, Juanita, lovely. She was a CNA. She was bilingual. My mom bilingual. Had a great time. After about a year and 3 months, Juanita comes and says, "Hey, Jeffrey, I can't work for Gladys anymore." I said, "What? Did my mom do something to you?" She said, "Oh, no. I love working for Gladys." I said, "What's going on?" I said, "I got a new job." "Fantastic." And she kind of looked at me like, "What do you mean?" "Well, I want you to get ahead, everything." I said, "And it's kind of coincidental because I was thinking, I've seen what you've done. I work here. I was thinking about hiring my own caregiver and, maybe saving a little bit of money, whatever, right? And I couldn't hire you because you're on a contract." So, when she was doing that, I said, "Do you mind if I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure, what?" I said, "How much are they paying you?" Now, this was some time ago. I was getting charged $25 an hour. And when she said 825, the look on my face shocked her because she actually grabbed my arm and said, "Oh, no, 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 Jeffrey, I'm getting a raise." I said, "Thank goodness, what? 850." And two things went off in my head. One, wow, there's a lot of margin there instantly. I went to that margin. And then secondly, why is she getting paid so little? That there's something wrong in this model. I mean, it's like one data point. And so she leaves. I turn to my mom, dementia, not coming that much with my mom. I said, "Mom, I now know why you came back in my life. I got to fix this. And I promise you I will." No, nothing like being a little arrogant and thinking I could fix it. But that was the gist. I wanted to say, I got to look into this. There's something rotten in Denmark, as they say. And, that started me on the journey because I took care of my mom here in Austin. May she rest in peace.
Help find care, then well beyond care, then keep
Yeah.
safe care. So three names, three pivots. What killed the first two, and what did each one teach you?
The first one got killed because the partnership was dysfunctional. The person that was doing the software oversold their capabilities. I mean, we had an okay piece of software, but he's like, "Well, I'm not doing anymore." He was an owner, but not an owner. So he very parochial. It was just bad. And the two other people that I had brought in with him, we did made some money, but I'm like, this is going nowhere. So we had to disband it. The second one of the original partners in Help Find Care came over to Well Beyond Care. She was a nurse, an RN, and she kept thinking we were a health tech company. She wanted to be a health tech company. She says, "Well, you're an engineer and I'm a nurse. We should do it." I said, "No, we're a recruiting company. We're really good at doing it." So we had and I'm going to say something else. She was greedy. She did not see the mission. And the mission really was about getting caregivers more money. And so what happened is that was direct to consumer. And the thing that bothered me, she kept saying, well, if we do this, we'll get more clients. I said, no, there's no levers you can pull. Like if I pull this lever 10 times, I'll get one client. No lever that you have that. So we said, we have to pivot. And she didn't want to pivot. And the pivot was going into private duty. So we're really good at recruiting, not really good at getting clients on the uptake. And so I said, we need a path where, because our recruiting is so good, that we can actually, benefit from it. So I took what we're really good at doing, payroll, scheduling, interviewing, and recruitment, and said, where is the void that we could fill? Private duty. And that's how it started. So that was the pivot into Keep Safe Care.
That's great. That's wild. So when did you crack the math that you could pay caregivers 2/3 of what you charge clients and still beat the competition on profit?
Well,
right? What did that spreadsheet look like?
I have to say something first. I thought erroneously that we would get more clients by being a little bit cheaper. Nope. We got more clients by paying our caregivers better. And that was the aha moment first. I said, ooh, I would say it. They said, oh, we're so glad you pay your caregivers better. And so after about a year, we're doing our taxes after about 6 months. And it comes to thing, says, well, it looks like we're paying like 2/3 of what we're charging our clients, just rough. And I'm like, yeah, we're paying over 2/3. So at that moment, branding, we came up with something called the 2/3 rule, which has been trademarked. And so the 2/3 rule was so easy to sell. And then when you're comparing eggs to eggs, I said, well, they're paying 45%. We're paying 2/3, 67%. Who do you want to hire at the same rate? If I'm charging 33, I'm paying 22, they're paying 16. Who do you want to work with? Well, you guys. And then they would say, well, it'd come around, well, it seems like you're not that greedy. I said, stop right there. I'm as greedy as anybody. But I know who the most important people are, my caregivers. So then they'd say, well, how do you do it? And I explained, got rid of all the back office. We got rid of all the people that are not necessary in delivering good care. And because I save that money, I pay the caregivers more. That's called efficiency. That's what I've done for 40 years. And I'm like, wow. And they understand it. Coincidentally, it made it a little bit easier towards the end because Doge, but yeah, it was like, oh yeah, what that guy Elon's doing. Yeah, exactly. But efficiency, do more with less, pay the people that are worth it. And so that's what came out. That's where it finally came out.
So engineers usually don't go into home care, right? So I guess, what did your engineering background actually let you see that maybe lifelong healthcare operators couldn't?
Well, it's always things that translate, right? If you look at the best companies, they don't invent, they innovate. So they take something that worked well in another industry, okay, and they translate it into their industry for whatever it is. So a lot of things that we did, so one of the things that it was, efficiency was number one, right? But the other things, I looked at really cool ideas out there, like online dating. And I said, well, that's a pretty good idea. They match people based on their likes and whatever, the age and all these, Pisces and whatever it is. I said, well, we can do the same thing with caregiving. So that was one of the algorithms we did. They call it AI now. I just call it algorithm. So that was one thing, take algorithms that work really well and make it more efficient. So the ability to process things through, I get a client, I move the client through the process and match them with a caregiver. It's a process. And the other thing is that almost everything's a process in life, everything. So people talk about marketing. Well, where do you get your people? Where do you get how do you get people? And I said, network marketing. And they're like, what? Network marketing? You mean like an MLM? No. Caregiving is hyper local. And I'm using terms that people are like, what's that? Well, word of mouth, in your face, touching hands. I mean, that's literally like being an evangelist. And so what you have to do is go to the people where the fish are swimming, right? That will refer to you. So home health, hospice, social workers, doctors' offices, surgeons, etc. because they're discharging someone that's going to need a caregiver in the home. I want the best caregiver. I don't want to see this patient back in the hospital. I don't want to see this patient back in my office because of poor caregiving. So that's part of the, I call them state machines, which Boolean algebra was one of my favorite courses in college. So I look at states of where things are, and I put codes to each of them so that I know where, oh, if I'm at 11310, I can only go to two places, and how do I get back there? So it's all about how you see the world as a connected process. That's caregiving. So I got rid of all the, how do you want to say, all the tasks that could be automated, and I left it to the bare bones of caregiving. And one day, caregiving will be with robotics too. I don't know when that day is going to be, but it's going to happen. So I'm ready for that.
That's super cool. Uh, okay, so I guess walk me through private duty in a box. What does it actually do, and what's the part of it that competitors can't copy?
Oh, it's an integrated system. So there's a lot of companies out there like Access, and I don't want to disparage them because they have really actually pretty good software, but they're only doing the back office, right? They're doing the payroll and the scheduling, and they're not replacing people that are in your office. They're making their jobs more efficient. My whole thing was, okay, how can I get rid of all the people that are doing non-essential tasks? So it starts from recruitment, curation, management, scheduling, payroll. That's one CRM. And the other one is, how do I tie that in with my referral CRM, which are like home health, hospice, psychiatrists, doctors' offices. So they're tied together. And then how do I tie that in with my client CRM? When someone calls me from a referral and says, I need a caregiver. So we actually have like, not to disparage HubSpot's just way too complicated for me. I need to, my job grade needs to be much higher. But it was just, no, they have the right idea, but they made it too complicated. So I said, how do I make CRM simpler? And so nobody has an integrated caregiver CRM, client CRM, back-end CRM that's all in the cloud. So I could be in Europe and I know exactly what everything's going on in any of the agencies in the United States. And it's because I know how many times they've contacted a referral source, how they visit them, everything's measured. So another thing, as an engineer, you can appreciate this. What gets measured gets done. It's all about measurements. Get rid of the non-essential things, automate it, measure the rest, tweak it to make it better, refine it, move on. And so that's nobody does that. So nobody in the healthcare profession comes from an engineering degree, and nobody with an engineering degree is in the healthcare unless they're making molecules of peptides or something. But nobody's in that soft science. And I also have some retail background. So all those things kind of tied in together. It's like the mutt of a stew that an engineer doing this on their own doesn't have the motivation to do it. They see the problem and like, I'm not motivated because I had to take care of my mom and I understood the other side of the equation, like retail and networking and stuff like that. That's the other side of the equation. Some people call it a polymath. I just call it. I know a lot of tricks. What am I? I'm good at a lot of things, but a master at none. So that's it.
The ultralight franchise model, it's like 10 to 25K, right? Versus the
Yeah.
industry's 100K to
Yeah.
250K. Who's the buyer? Who shows up and writes checks?
Okay, so the reason why we called it an ultralight franchise is because I didn't want to sell a franchise. I wanted to sell a software license, but because I wanted them to use the 2/3 rule in some of my branding, they say if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, even though it's not a duck, they're going to call you a franchise. So do an FDD. So speaking of ducks, I literally put a software license wrapped in an FDD. So it's kind of like a software turducken, which is like, so it's really you're buying a software license, but I'm treating it like a franchise. But it's not a franchise because I don't charge royalties. Our upfront cost is pitifully small, and your upfront cost to start it is pitifully small. So the other aspect of it was, okay, if I'm going to get big fast, I got to make people that normally couldn't afford to run one able to run one and run it efficiently and get to profitability quicker. Remember, profit, profit. It's all about margins, doing more with less. So because you do that, when I'm standing in, with franchisors and whatnot, and I'm looking at all the people at them, I'm like, they all kind of look like me. I'd like to change that. And not because it's the right thing to do, but the people that actually have the experience don't have the capital. How can I change that? So another little tweak, right? And the other thing I'm finding out is generational wealth. How do you create generational wealth? Well, you do it by getting big so that you don't have to be in the operations anymore. You make money of other people doing good work and getting paid well for you. That's how you make generational wealth. So how can you get from people that, this is America. People get rich all the time, do a legitimate thing. I said, how do you do it so you can spread that out more? And that's part of it. So, I got approached from a gentleman. He wrote a book called The Investment Grade Franchise. And I read his book and he contacted me and we're looking at each other and I said, oh, you wrote the book of what I was thinking of where we need to go. He says, you created the franchise I wanted. I said, yeah, Frito-Lay. That's all. And that's what it's all about. We make it so ultimately share the risk, share the reward. I'm also a big favor of that, where make it, I don't need all the money up front. I'll make a lot of money when you're making a lot of money. I make a little bit of money when you're making a lot of money. And if I have a lot of people like you, I make a lot of money. So that's how I look at it. You share the risk, share the reward. And when they're doing great, I'm doing great. But until then, I'm doing okay. So the motivation is for them to get wealthy. If they get wealthy, have a whole bunch of them, I'm doing okay.
So you just sold your Austin prototype to one of your own franchisees, right? So you could
Yep. Yep.
go national across 31 states. Why now,
Yep.
and what's the realistic ceiling?
So that's a good question because remember, I didn't know anything about private duty. I didn't know anything about network marketing in that space. I didn't know how to advertise it. I didn't know what would sell and what wouldn't sell. So I had to throw a lot of spaghetti on the wall. That's what they all say. So I'm throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. Well, this is when I found out advertising doesn't work. Even Google ads, even geo ads with Google doesn't work. Stop spending your money on it. So I essentially, the reason why I sold it, and I had to make sure the software worked. So first I had to make the software work on one unit. That was our first quote franchise. So when we started our first unit, in the back of my mind, I said, okay, I know I'm going to sell more of these. So let's set the first one up like I sold it to somebody. And there were two separate corporations. Happened to be the same owners of both corporations, but they're different corporations. We filed different taxes, different bank accounts, everything. Prove that out. Next, I had to say, can I operate multiple locations at the same time with another franchise? That was the first franchise that we sold. And I had to wait and do all the pain of real world. You could do things in a black box, but the real world puts things at you that you don't expect. So we did that. Then I was talking to him. He says, hey, Jeffrey, I want to quit my job. I want to buy all of Austin. Fine, here it is. And it was already cash flow positive. So he bought that, sold it to him at a discount. Fantastic. He's off and running. And the reason why I moved, I couldn't learn anything else from operating it, even though it was profitable. I couldn't learn anything else. So now I have to move into the next phase, which is massive expansion rapidly. I know a little bit about it. I know I'm going to have to associate myself with people who know more about it. So I'm not that arrogant yet that I know everything, but it's like I know what I don't know, and I don't know how to do this, so I got to learn. Now, in the franchising space, I've learned a lot in a year. I've learned, and brokers aren't going to like me for this, brokers are not very useful. And they're not useful, excuse me, they're not useful to me. They're useful for other people. They're not useful because they can't make enough money on it. So I said, okay, I got to bypass brokers. How am I going to do that? Direct to consumer. I'm really good at doing that. And so, so we went to a brokers conference, and I'm talking to the broker. I said, how do you get your clients? Craigslist. I said, well, I know how to do Craigslist, and we've gotten people off Craigslist. I said, I also know other ways how to get people. It's like, really? That's it? You don't have a you don't have a network? I was like shocked. I said, okay, that's not going to help me at all. What is going to help me? So doing things like this guy, the investment grade franchise, things that could grow fast, and how do you structure it? So my military school training helped me a lot with that, with command and control and pushing it out. So that,
Where does AI fit into keep safe care over the next 24 months? Voice agents, scheduling, caregiving matching, like where does it move the needle the most?
it'll move it most when a call out happens. Even though we don't get a lot of call outs, the thing that I see, we're just talking about this was um, say a caregiver calls out and they're calling out instantly. There's 4 caregivers that best match to fill that place. They get notified without any human intervention. That's one of the best places to do it. Also, where is the best place to uh, so like when there's news of someone expanding, a home health or someone changing something, we get notified with that. So that's the best place to do it. AI does not work on advertising. No matter what anybody's AI is not working in healthcare. They have all these companies. Oh, we listen to this. No, no, it doesn't work. You're expending money and you're blowing smoke up my skirt. That is not working. So for us, the best thing that we do, improving our algorithms, improving our matching algorithms, and scheduling. Scheduling, we don't dictate scheduling, the client dictates scheduling. So what we do is that when we're given a schedule, the matching algorithm is what's going to help us the most. And strangely, this is going to sound bizarre, AI has really helped me position our company for growth. And that was an unexpected bonus. I have literally, I'm going to say this, like gotten 5 people's worth of feedback and testing, A/B testing and input and going down what they call it, prompting. Sometimes they say stupid stuff, you got to reprompt them. But the testing of theories with AI, I'm just going back on, man, if I had this 40 years ago, what could I have done? It's just it's more for positioning the company and moving forward and testing ideas. And the best idea was, how should we move forward with caregivers? Is our pay correct? Is this correct? And they go out there and they could search the whole internet and say, I had a chat with Chat GPT. They said, not only is this a great idea, this is an idea that must happen. I said, thank you, Chat. I know you're blowing smoke up my skirt, but that's okay. At least you didn't tell me this is stupid. So I keep coming back to that.
So if you nail this and keep safe care becomes, let's say, the dominant model in private duty, what does the caregiver's life in America look like? Let's say 10 years out.
Well, it depends where you are. Okay, in Massachusetts, because somebody called me up because they're thinking about doing a conversion. Their rate is $40 an hour to the client on average. That's what they're charging. And I said, well, what are you paying your caregivers? Well, Massachusetts has an $18 minimum. We pay 18 to 20. And I said, really? 18 to 20? Well, let me see. I divide 40 by by 3. So that's 1, that's 4, multiplied by 10. I'd be paying 28. And they're saying there's no way you can pay 28. Yep. That's a living wage. California, 30. They charge $40 to $50 an hour. I'm paying my caregivers 30. They're trying to mandate $30 an hour minimum wage. I don't need to mandate it. I can pay that and make money. So all of a sudden, in the caregiving, and this is between the ears, and this is what we teach in our mini MBA. It's all the relationship between the ears. Caregivers have always been the low man on the totem pole, and so we flipped that. I said they're the most important people, and you making money. And they're like, what? So what you have to do is hire professionals and adults. So if you pay them well, the likelihood you're ever getting a professional adult gets higher. So I'm looking like 10 years down the road, people see us. Oh, you also said what's our theoretical limit on how many agencies we have? 5,000 across the country. And why? Because we're going to put a lot of people out of business. We just pay better. Why would a caregiver go and work for somebody who's paying $5 less an hour for the exact same amount of care, same work? You wouldn't, and they can't compete with it because they have their own model. So join or perish. That's my motto to them. So The other thing with caregivers is that now you have, quote, a living wage, and mission accomplished to my mom. And that's what I want. The plight of caregivers in America, I was in my Ivy Tower working as an electrical engineer. I had no idea how difficult it was to be a caregiver and how little they get paid. They're all appreciated because they're doing, heaven's work. Pay them what they're doing. And, that's they're doing great work. They need to get paid more. So the model today is if I pay a caregiver more in Austin, and this is already happening, if you match my rate in Austin at 21, 22 bucks an hour, you're charging the client 45. I'm charging the client 33. If you're charging 45, I'm paying my caregiver. If I'm charging 45, I'm paying my caregiver 30. Who wins? It's called a double bind. I've put all my competition in a double bind. You cannot compete in a double bind. As Captain Kirk in the what is it? Maru, Kobayashi Maru. He was in a double bind, but he cheated. Double binds are hard to get out of. That's where I am.
Well, Jeffrey, what an interview, man. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. It was touching. It was inspirational. It was amazing. It was awesome. So thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate going so deep into all those little questions that I had there, but you answered them flawlessly. So thank you so much. I see we got almost 20 people listening. Thank you all for tuning in.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. And for everyone in the future that checks it out, until next time. Okay, Jeff, stick around. Jeff, stick around for 1 second. I'm just going to bring this one to an end.